Everybody, I'm Tech Wolf. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be reacting to 4 short horror animated stories. That was hard to say. With that being said, let's get started. Also, I got somebody to the left of me, so if you hear anything like chewing, that's just him eating lunch. So he decided to react to them with me, so yeah. So now let's get into it. Okay, so this first one is called A Terrifying Morning Jog. Let's get started. The story is told from the perspective of a woman.
Before heading to my local community college for classes, I like to wake up at around 5 in the morning for a brisk morning jog.
Okay.
It helps clear my head and definitely helps wake me up so I can focus in class. When I first started doing this, it was a huge hassle, but over time I grew accustomed to it, and it's now a highlight of my day. However, as time went on, I found myself becoming quite uncomfortable. Not in a physical sense, but more so it was like my fight or flight instincts began kicking in seemingly at random. I'd whip my head around to see if anybody was following me or even peeking at me through the wooded park in which I ran, but couldn't see anybody. It didn't help that it was dark either, so even if there was somebody creeping in the dark, there was no way I could tell.
I would never do this because I have proof over to my left here. I'm scared of the dark, so I would never run in the dark by myself, even if it was in the city. It's a very faint one. I'll put one at the end of this video just to show you how dark it is in my room at night, okay? Anyway, let's continue.
As an extra precaution, I started carrying around some pepper spray in order to fend off any would-be attackers.
That's good.
But as time went on and that eerie sensation occurred more and more, I just couldn't bring myself to run anymore. A friend of mine, Daniel, a self-proclaimed runner himself, told me that I shouldn't worry about it. He said that the mind plays tricks on oneself when it can't see things clearly, especially in the dark. After being reassured by him, I decided to give jogging another go. So today, like any other day, I slapped on some black leggings, tied my hair up in a ponytail, put on my kicks, and set my music volume to full blast and headed out the door. I felt fantastic at first and was loving the cool breeze and crisp morning air. But then, about halfway into my jog, a tall and hooded figure stepped out onto the path in front of me. Quickly, I pulled out my pepper spray and yelled at the person to leave me alone. The person quickly pulled down their hood, revealing themselves to be Daniel. I sighed with relief as he approached and laughed at how funny it was that we ran the same path. I expressed to him that I felt safer knowing he was around. Daniel, however, stepped a little too close and gave a crooked smile. He said that of course I was safe with him, as apparently I had been safe with him for weeks. The realization of what he meant quickly dawned on me as his hands began to creep their way around my waist. I screamed at him to let me go and prepared to spray him, but he slapped it out of my hand and proceeded to grab my throat. With strained screams, I begged him to let me go and for someone to help me. He yelled at me and tightened his grip, asking why I wasn't thankful for his watchful eyes for the past several weeks. I was stunned at the complete personality change from the once gentle friend I knew. Pretty soon, I started to black out and grow weak, but just before passing out, I could hear the sounds of dogs barking and an older man screaming for Daniel to let me go. In a panic, he released me and ran back into the woods. I gasped for air before I began sobbing as the man escorted me out of the park and brought me straight to the police station. And despite my fears and reservations, I told them everything I knew about Daniel, or what I thought I knew, and what he had done to me. They immediately sent a patrol car out and told me that everything would be okay. The next day, I heard Daniel never showed up to class. He had been arrested several hours later after I left the police station and confessed to everything with a disgusting amount of self-righteousness. He was
Good.
recorded as saying, "She needed me. Only I can protect her." Who knows what could have been hiding in those woods? It took me a while to feel comfortable going back to school, and even then, my trust in people was never the same again. I guess even the ones you were close to can snap, just like that, at any time.
Okay, so that was the first one. Okay, that was the first one. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start the second one. A close call. What is it about?
I had just reluctantly returned home from an extended vacation trip to Japan, after experiencing delicious food beyond compare, a beautiful country, and spending time with amazing people. Needless to say,
I eventually want to go to Japan. I like the colors. One second, I'm stopping the recording. Okay, and problem solved.
a bit depressed about coming home. On my first day back home, I went straight to my bedroom and passed out before doing anything else. Rather, I didn't have the energy to do anything else. It was probably for that reason that I failed to notice subtle hints that my home was not as lonely without me as I believed. Hours later, I awoke in the middle of the night to the sound of scuttling noises and the floorboards creaking. Understandably confused, I got out of bed and made my way into the hallway that was connected to both the living room and kitchen. Cautiously, I crept my way through the darkness, groping the wall next to me for balance in my tired state as I trudged forward. I, however, made the fatal mistake of stepping onto one of the loudest boards in the hallway, alerting whoever or whatever was lurking in the shadows of the next room. I paused, as did the entity in the next room, before a whoosh of air was heard as they retreated into whatever crevice they had come out of. Taking a nervous gulp of air, I walked into the living room and turned on the nearby lamp that dimly lit up the room. Looking around, I spotted not a soul, but rather some of my furniture was disturbed. What's more, a couple of my kitchen cabinets were slightly ajar. Bewildered, but with my guard up, I went over and closed them all before readjusting my furniture, by which point I had relaxed. I chalked up the odd noises and movements to my jet-lagged brain and shrugged, deciding to just head back to bed. I wish the story ended there, but I was not so lucky. Before entering the hallway to my room, I saw that the large metal covering to the air vent above the couch was missing. Peering up at it, I mumbled, "What the?" before a crooked face filled with abject disdain for my existence popped into view. Startled, I fell to the ground and began crawling away, as I heard the man begin screeching incoherently as he dropped down onto the couch. I watched in horror as his joints cracked beneath his raggedy hoodie and heavily stained jeans. He stared at me, silent now, before brandishing a knife out of his back pocket and pointed it towards me.
"My house now! Mine! Mine! You left it! It's mine!"
He shouted with a slurred voice as he charged towards me. I hurriedly crawled towards my room and slammed the door behind me and locked it as he started jabbing his blade into the door, yelling at me to die. Shakily, I called the police and sobbed as I told them what was happening. Thankfully, I was told a patrol car was nearby my neighborhood and they would be at my house in minutes. I stayed on the phone and picked up a baseball bat just in case that deranged cretin broke down my door. A few horrendous minutes later, the police arrived, and after a quick but violent struggle, they managed to subdue the intruder. After locking him in the back seat of the patrol car, the cops investigated my house and found that the man apparently had been living there while I was gone. But not just that. Apparently, he'd been staying at my house without me noticing for a few months. According to the police, they found paper stuffed under the couch that was filled with nothing but incoherent ramblings about how he planned to kill me one day when the time was right. With the dates next to each entry predating my trip to Japan by an uncomfortable amount of time. Frankly, I'm happy to be alive and relieved that the situation was resolved so quickly. But still, I make sure to triple check the locks in my home after that little incident.
Yeah, I would too. Would you? Yes, he hates it too, because I know y'all can't hear him. He said he hates it too. With a few more words that I don't feel like or care to say. So, he said, third one and final one. I know I said 4, but I could only find 3. So, next one. Okay, so here's the final one. It's called Arms of a Goddess. So, let's continue.
Carrie wanted nothing to do with the daily hustle and bustle of working in the city, having to commute early in the morning for a job that was only a half hour away thanks to the absurd amount of traffic she had to fight through. To make matters worse, she was undeniably beautiful, with her shining blue eyes and vibrant red hair that seemed to ignite whenever it went under direct light. In the city, that made her a high-priority target for catcalling and being followed around by less than well-intentioned fellows. Eventually, she could no longer deal with these issues, and so decided to quit her job and do what she loved to do the most: write. Thankfully, she had a sizable amount of money saved up and a good chunk of savings that allowed her to live comfortably for at least a year. In other words, she had 1 year to make it big as a writer, or she was screwed. Not wanting to live in the city anymore, she also moved out into the woods, opting to purchase a relatively small yet cozy cabin. Her family was understandably upset by this turn of events, but she did not mind their frustrations. What was done, as she told them. The first few weeks out there was a great success for her, at least in her mind. She wrote thousands of words every day for short stories and even a big novel she had planned. In between her writing binges, she would take walks around her property, soaking in the sweet and natural scents that the outside world had to offer, taking inspiration from the earth.
I was about to say, is that a walking bush? No, it's a caterpillar. It's a really hairy caterpillar. But you can see my point, right? From like right... Hold on, 1 second.
Natural scents that the...
Right there. Y'all thought that was a walking bush too, right? I'm not the only one. If y'all thought it was a walking bush, down in the comments, do hashtag bush. Okay? Hashtag bush.
The outside world had to offer, taking inspiration from the earth around her and the occasional occurrence of a small forest critter that brought her joy. One day, however, when she was on one of her walks and a few miles away from her cabin, she encountered something odd. Beneath one of the pine trails she often frequented was a rather arcane-looking skull that brought her a great deal of concern.
Yo, that's a cool skull.
She knelt down to inspect it and cocked an eyebrow as she looked it over. By all measurements, it looked like a normal skull of a deer, complete with antlers.
I'd take it home.
There were 2 odd additions to the skull, however. The first was that there were 2 small horns that protruded just above where the forehead would be. And the second was that just below where its eye sockets were another set of eyes that were about the size of a human's. Hoping that it was just some cruel trick or some artistic creation and some abomination, she decided to pick it up and find out for herself. Upon touching the skull, she instantly felt a deep sensation of dread surge throughout her body, making her feel sick. Carrie backed away from it in a hurry and eyed it frightfully as she stumbled to her feet and jogged all the way back to her cabin, all the while trying to ignore the feeling of being watched as she did so.
Maybe I
As soon
wouldn't
as she
touch it.
arrived home, she slammed the door behind her and locked it. She then closed her blinds and peeked outside through them to try and see if there was actually someone there, or if her mind was just playing tricks on her. When nothing happened after a few minutes, she slumped down onto her couch and sighed in relief, chalking the situation up to just being isolated from others for an extended period of time. That night, as she was writing, she was interrupted by the loud grunting of a deer. She chuckled, thinking it was just some
That's no
buck
deer.
making its way through the area.
That's
Her
no
hands
deer.
froze in fear, when a cacophony of grunts piped up one after another. Quickly, she turned off all the lights inside, grabbed a knife from the kitchen, and went to the window praying to God that there was just a herd of deer outside.
That's not
To her
deer.
complete and utter dismay, she was wrong. Standing in front of her cabin about 10 yards away stood 3 individuals wearing long black cloaks. Adorning their heads were deer skulls, the same type of deer skull that she had encountered earlier that day. One by one, they made the same grunting sounds from before, only this time they began walking towards the cabin. Understandably freaked out, she grabbed her phone and attempted to call the police. Tears filled her eyes as she saw "no service" written across the top of her phone. In frustration, she threw it on the ground and returned to the window to see that they were nearly at her door now, their grunts louder than ever. She screamed at them to go away, that she was armed, and to just leave her alone. After her panic
1 second, y'all. Okay, let's continue now.
filled rant, she backed away from the window, shakily holding the knife in her hands. Seconds later, she turned into a sobbing mess as the individuals antagonizing her began knocking on her door.
Please, just go away!
She screamed. The knocking became louder and more insistent as time went by, until just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, it stopped.
What?
She asked aloud, surprised that the threat decided to move along. She untensed her body and leaned up against the wall to compose herself. Without warning, a loud metallic clanging sound was heard, and she saw her doorknob stumble out of the door and onto the wooden floor below. Slowly, her door creaked open, and in stepped the tallest of the 3 masked individuals. Even with his face obscured, she could see how distorted and disfigured his features were beneath the skull.
Stop! Please leave! Don't make me use this!
Carrie shouted as she raised the knife back up and aimed it towards him. He did nothing but stand silently and outstretched his arms as though he were a saint posing for a painting. In defiance, Carrie screamed and charged toward the man, knife poised to pierce his chest. Quicker than the wind, he swatted her hand to the side and followed up with a power punch to her gut, winding her in the process. She collapsed limply into his arms, heaving and gasping for air. "Chair," she heard him command the other 2 who rushed into the cabin. Taking a chair from her dining table, they set it in the middle of the room, and Carrie was gingerly seated in it. Defenseless and weak, she whispered for them to take whatever they wanted, but to just leave her alone as they proceeded to strap her down with twine. "The goddess despises material goods. Divinity has no such need for such petty items. What she seeks is beauty, and the ability to create beauty. You're a writer, yes? Surely you know what I mean."
How do you know I'm a writer?
"Because the goddess led you to us, my dear."
I don't understand.
Carrie muttered as she looked between the 3 men. "Sculptures, paintings, pottery, buildings, books, shrines, all created with the arms of talented individuals. You should feel blessed." Carrie squinted her eyes at him, completely bewildered at the situation.
Why are you here?
"She says you have lovely arms, Carrie."
Excuse me?
Tears returned to her eyes as her stomach sank. "So much potential not yet used. This is what she desires, and you have exactly that." He walked behind Carrie and placed his hands on her shoulders, and with bony fingers ran them up and down her arms. Carrie shuddered and swallowed hard.
You don't have to do this.
Carrie whimpered. "I'm sorry, child. I weep for you. Truly, I do." His grip tightened around her shoulders, his fingernails digging into her skin and drawing blood. Carrie screamed in pain.
But just think, you're going to be part of something so undeniably beautiful that this pain will become something to rejoice about.
Upon realizing what was going to happen to her, Carrie's eyes widened and she thrashed around, begging and pleading to be let go. But all of those pleas fell upon the ears of men deaf to her plight. Detective Holt walked under the yellow tape that surrounded the cabin of Carrie Wilkins and went straight inside. In the center of the room sat the woman in question. He shook his head and did his best not to vomit at what he saw. A ring of leaves surrounded the chair that Carrie sat in, and a crown of twigs and flowers adorned her bloodied head. Her mouth was agape, with a few berries resting upon her tongue. Worst of all,
I
her
don't know if I can
arms
show
had been
that.
surgically removed, and pools of blood bathed the leaves below from her still leaking arms.
I don't know if I can
Holt
show
exited
that.
the cabin, loosened the tie to his suit in frustration, and scratched his rugged graying beard. As he contemplated where to go from that disturbing sight, he was approached by an officer.
Detective Holt, as I'm sure you're aware, the victim was found early this morning due to her parents making a surprise visit and found her in that state.
Do you have any news for me, or are you just repeating to me verbally the messed up shit I just saw?
The young woman cleared her throat and apologized.
This was found on the table next to the victim.
She handed Holt a folded piece of paper that had a crudely drawn skull and blood on it. It read as follows.
The time for the goddess to awaken has come. With her arms she crafts. But what use are arms without eyes, which wish to see her own creations?
Cultists. Holt grunted as he peered back inside at the mutilated woman.
What do we do, sir?
Drink. It's gonna be a long day.
Okay, that was the last one. So, yeah, I think that one was the best out of them all. I liked them all, but I like that one the most. Mostly because of the blood. I like the blood.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
One second, I have to go get the lights. Okay, so I like the gore. You said you like the skull, right?
Yeah.
I like the skull too. I like the way it looked. Like I would.
But after finding out what it belongs to, is like cool. It was not something to be over obsessed with.
Yeah, like this skull right here.
I saw deer skulls before and stuff, so when I first saw it.
This is pretty cool. I think I'm gonna try to make it out of clay, but not for a video, just because I'm not good at making stuff out of clay. Also, if the audio sounds a little bad, it's because I don't know how to put my microphone. Because see, there's a rubber band holding it onto the arm because the piece broke. Yay! Also, I ordered a webcam. Will be in sometime this week. This video is being posted. So, yeah, the next video you see after this one should be with the webcam. But yeah, thumbs up. Remember, comment #bush if you thought that one caterpillar was a walking bush. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye bye.